So with that, I am going to read off the few comment cards or speaker cards that I have. If you would like to make a comment again, Raul's going to be walking around. He'll collect that. As I read your name, please come up to this microphone. We do have the court reporter here, so I would ask that you state your name for the record. Even though I'm calling your name, if you can state your name so the court reporter will get you saying it, that would be great. And then there will be a timer that will appear on the screen that will show 3 minutes. It will just count down. There's no buzzer or something, and we don't have very many people here, so we're not going to be extremely rigorous, but we would ask that you be respectful of everyone's time in making your comment. So the first person I have is Don Jones, and then Joe, looks like Solis, and then Dr. Tom Williams. So I have Don Jones, Joe Solis, and Dr. Tom Williams.
Buenas tardes, vecinos. ¿Cómo están? Qué bueno. My name is Don Jones. I'm with the Note 710 Organizing Committee and the Caltrans Tenants Association and the United California Tenants Association as well. I'm here to speak on behalf of Senator David Roberti, who apologized that he can't be here today, but he will be with us on Monday in Pasadena. It's interesting that they show the Roberti bill legislation up there, but I asked the senator, did anybody ask you anything about this, Senator? He said, no one asked me. I said in the environmental impact document, and he said, not in my name. So I'd like to read his comments to you. My name is David Roberti, and I served in the California State Senate from 1981 to 1993. I will be here today with the citizens of El Sedano, Pasadena, and South Pasadena who are facing a major housing problem that needs your urgent attention. In the 1960s, the California Department of Transportation, as part of the 710 Meridian Route approval, acquired properties in the communities of El Sedano, Pasadena, and South Pasadena under eminent domain. These properties would have been demolished for the expansion of the 710 freeway, displacing hundreds of residents, bringing crime, hazardous pollution, and dividing these historic neighborhoods. Thanks to the hard work of those and perseverance of those communities, the Caltrans Tenants Association, the UCT Association, and community groups, the 710 extension project was not completed, but their struggle continues over the now surplus properties. In 1979, the California legislature adopted the Roberti bill. The Roberti bill emphasized the shortage of decent, safe, and sanitary housing, which persons and families of low or moderate income can afford, and requires surplus properties to be offered to existing occupants at affordable rates. According to the Caltrans 2015 Draft Environmental Impact Report, pursuant to the Roberti bill, Caltrans intends to sell these surplus properties to, quote, provide needed affordable housing. However, Caltrans has been neglectfully allowing properties to fall into disrepair, bringing blight to these communities. A 2012 state audit report calls Caltrans property management poor, something the residents of these communities have affirmed for years. In addition to failing to perform annual property inspections to resolve major habitability issues such as mold and earthquake damage, Caltrans has been unable to demonstrate that the repairs were performed were necessary, reasonable, or cost effective. Caltrans has served numerous eviction notices to these tenants, and in its draft relocation impact report has identified 148 households that will be displaced under the surplus property sales. While the impact report has been unavailable for review, previous relocation related to the 710 project have identified as particularly problematic for residents that are already overcrowded. This will affect the elderly, low income, ethnic minorities, those who do not have access to private vehicles, and disabled residents. This represents many of the residents of El Sedano, Pasadena, and South Pasadena. I cannot allow that to happen, not in my name. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have Joe Solis and Dr. Tom Williams. Is Joe here? Joe, going once? What's that? No comment, okay. All right, Dr. Tom Williams, and then we have Mike Rivera.
Good evening. Oh, yo paseo. Come Smith.
Could you just state your name for the record? I'm sorry.
Dr. Tom Williams, LA 32 Neighborhood Council Board member, Sierra Club Transportation Board member, and a few others. The basic element, is this the right way to go? First off, let's have an extension until, say, September the 28th, because it's very confusing documents. And in fact, when you have the technical reports separated from the references, we don't know who's on first and which ones take priority. Therefore, okay, first thing, the no action alternative. Another 20 years of Caltrans management of these properties, God help us. Based upon the last 30 years that I know of, and there were those before me, it's not a good deal, and it should be changed from no action to future without project or future without other actions. As part of the extension, we'd also like to have an outreach meeting in South Pasadena. They're one of the three, right? Okay. There's also an issue as to, did anyone actually find the announcement for this meeting and Monday's meeting on the Caltrans webpage? I went through searching for over a half hour, and it's not listed as an event. It's not on the calendar. It's not what's new. So very poor outreach. How did anyone actually find out about it? We didn't have enough handouts yesterday at the Neighborhood Council Board member and meeting, and we didn't have them this morning at the Seniors Club meeting. So it's difficult to find out what's going on. Having some experience, why do you have to have the subsurface property when you don't even know where the line is going to go? Because we've already put in to the EIR last night that they need to relocate the entire tunnel alignment to a much quicker, faster, cheaper way. So can we separate out everything north of Templeton? Should be sold immediately? And oh, by the way, the SB 4118, I think it was, and Roberti didn't give a 5-year program for sales. They said, do it. So why isn't that an alternative? Do it immediately, and that should be the base case based upon the rules or the regulations and such. We're also concerned, has anyone considered the property tax impacts of this project on LA, South Pasadena, and Pasadena? Those are not addressed either as to would it be continuing for another 20 years under the no action? So we're looking at several different views, and we will be submitting them online. The problem with your online is it has a 8 megabyte limit on uploading, and it also has a loss of all formatting in the direct inputs. So it's a trash input page. I would highly recommend somebody improve it so that it's more user-friendly and accepts MS Word documents. Thank you.
Thank you. Christopher Sutton, followed by Victoria Sandoval.
My name is Christopher Sutton. I'm an attorney for the Caltrans tenants in the 710 corridor, which is a Caltrans tenant over the north end of the corridor. I have a lot of comments, and I may have to come back and speak again. I want to turn in a copy of the Caltrans draft relocation impact report, which was apparently excluded from this EIR because it was released after the draft for EIR was released, even though the metadata in this document show that it was drafted sometime in April 2015. So Caltrans, typical of their continually dishonest and fraudulent conduct, held the DRIR until after the DEIR was released, so they would not have to evaluate the 148 home families being displaced. So I want to hand a copy to the Caltrans people. So I see that Mrs. Allison, whatever her name is, has moved away. So given them a copy of the draft relocation impact report, and I want its analysis and a response to it included in the draft EIR. Earlier today, I sent in an EIR comment on the website. I tried to print out a copy of my comments, but the Caltrans website, as was earlier stated, you can't print out a copy of your own comments because it cuts it off when you try to print it off. This is what I tried to print out from my comments, and it shows where my comments were cut off by the Caltrans software. So the Caltrans software is defective in allowing people to print out their own comments. I'd like to turn this in as well. The reason why, I got a minute and 20 seconds, but I should be back. The reason why Caltrans will displace 148 people, or 148 families, and maybe more, is because Caltrans uses income data from the entire county to set the qualifications to participate in the Affordable Sales Program. By the way, the initials of that is ASP, which means a poisonous snake, asp. The snake that Cleopatra used to kill herself. So the Affordable Sales Program uses income data from the whole county, which then drives down the qualification criteria, yet they use data from the adjoining neighborhoods, which are very wealthy, to drive up the value of the homes and the rent on the properties. So Caltrans uses the income levels to keep people out of the Affordable Sales Program, and then they use sales data and market data to keep people out of the purchasing and renting of the properties. So that Caltrans is not consistently using the geographic areas for sales data and for income data. They maximize the amount of displacement that will occur by selectively choosing data which results in people being disqualified so that they're allowed under California HCD regulations and HUD regulations to redefine area median income. And if they would use the local median income in the areas where they are using the real estate to set the prices, the median income would come up, the 150% median range in 54237 in the Roberti Act would come up, and a larger number of people would qualify to buy and rent their houses based upon their actual income, not the income of people who live in Watts or in Lancaster or other places. So that Caltrans needs to consistently use the income and sales data from the same geographic locations. And this is the kind of thing that was never evaluated in this draft environmental impact report about why people are going to be displaced, because Caltrans always uses the data that results in the maximum displacement of people. Caltrans for the last 50 years has always placed freeways and Caltrans projects in areas where there are low-income people and minority people. That's what they're doing and always done. Caltrans, when they hire people to do maintenance on these properties, regular contractors won't work for Caltrans because it takes 6 months to a year to get paid. Caltrans hires shoddy contractors who then, we believe, are simply paying money back under the table to the Caltrans employees, and that's why maintenance is done at empty properties. Roofs are replaced that are not leaking, driveways are poured where no one's living, and Caltrans has a continuous practice of apparently spending money on unnecessary repairs while not doing repairs in the houses where people live. And why was Caltrans real property manager, Linda Wilford, asked to leave Caltrans? It's a mystery. She never would have quit on her own. We believe she left under the threat of criminal prosecution.
If you could keep your comments to the 3 minutes and focused on the environmental document.
The environmental document in this instance is a result of Caltrans' corrupt practices in trying to displace people, trying to pay money to contractors unrelated to the community. Why do none of the Caltrans employees promote translation of these materials into Spanish or into Korean or other native language of the people who are affected, but are circulating a document that even a lawyer has a hard time understanding? So that I would like to have it translated into Spanish. But beyond that, Caltrans has segmented this DEIR from the SR 710 North DEIR, even though these two DEIRs are intimately related. Under CEQA, you can't segment projects between two EIRs. And then this DEIR is saying we will not know what we're going to sell or who we're going to displace until the other DEIR on the freeway is finished, which has just had comments close yesterday, and the final EIR on that won't be out until sometime next year. So what Caltrans has done, by segmenting the relocation report, segmenting the freeway tunnel EIR from the surplus housing EIR, they have failed to analyze the interrelationship between these documents, which is a violation of CEQA, and I have additional comments, and I'll come back and when people have said their say. The purpose of the section of the DEIR mistakenly says that the purpose of the Roberti Law is to provide affordable housing, without saying the purpose of the Roberti Law, as provided in section 54235 of the Government Code, is to preserve these neighborhoods and to provide the people who live in the houses today the right to stay in those houses, so that by Caltrans failing to evaluate the duty of Caltrans to preserve the neighborhoods under the Roberti Law, they have mistakenly characterized the Roberti Law as simply a law to provide affordable housing to anybody, even if it means displacing the people who are there today. But in fact, the purpose of the Roberti Law is to preserve the people in place at the housing. And that's what Senator Roberti will tell you when he speaks on Monday. In fact, in the Roberti Law, this is in the third paragraph of 54235, it says, the legislature further finds and declares that the displacement of large numbers of persons as a result of the sale of surplus residential property owned by agencies of the state is a significant environmental effect within the meaning of Article 19 of the California Constitution. And what that means is that even though these properties were acquired with gas tax money, which is what Article 19 governs, Article 19 of the Constitution says that money acquired by the gas tax is also to be used to mitigate the environmental effects of Caltrans activities. So that if Caltrans destroys a park, it's supposed to replace a park. If Caltrans destroys a housing, it's supposed to replace housing. On the 105 corridor, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, Caltrans went out and affirmatively constructed hundreds and hundreds of units to replace the housing that was displaced by building the Century Freeway. So that the DEIR fails to include an alternative where Caltrans will build replacement housing for the people. Now, going back in a little history, back in 1989, Caltrans approached the legislature in another law, the Uniform Relocation Act, and got an amendment passed at Caltrans' insistence that said any person who lives in a property that has been owned by a public agency for more than 2 years shall not be entitled to relocation assistance, payments, or benefits of any kind. So that the no impact analysis in the draft relocation impact report and in the draft environmental impact report is simply contrary to state law, because the 148 families who will be displaced are barred from receiving relocation or assistance or replacement housing by a law that Caltrans had put in place. And Caltrans has not proposed any kind of relocation plan under federal relocation law that would specifically entitle these people to a new location. So that the impact, the environmental impact of displacing 148 families by Caltrans' manipulation of the data, the income data and the sales data, so that many people will not qualify to buy their own place where they live, is in fact an unavoidable environmental impact that must be mitigated in some manner. In CEQA, section 21004 allows Caltrans and any public agency when they have an environmental impact that must be mitigated, to use all the discretionary power they have to mitigate that impact. 54-237 of the Roberti bill allows Caltrans to invoke HUD and HCD regulations, which allows Caltrans to redefine area median income. And Caltrans could redefine area median income to include the specific 3 zip codes where people reside in the corridor, so that the area median income and for housing costs would be the same geographic area. This would mitigate the environmental impact of displacement by allowing a much larger, maybe everyone, to qualify to buy the house in which they reside. Now, in addition, aside from the Roberti law, other state laws allow people to buy the property in which they live, have a business, operate a nonprofit. And that's in Streets and Highways Code section 100.2 through 118.6. 118.6 of the Streets and Highways Code requires Caltrans to develop regulations that explain how they decide which properties they're going to sell and which properties they're not going to sell. A year ago, Caltrans released a list of 42 properties and a few vacant properties that they decided to sell without any explanation. We have been demanding for over a year that they explain and adopt regulations about how they choose which properties to sell and which properties not to sell. We have no information. The draft regulations are silent on how the decisions are made on which properties they were going to sell and which one they're not going to sell. We need to have regulations that address the environmental impacts of the displacement and the selection of these various properties. Without that regulation, the entire process violates the Administrative Procedures Act. In 2007, Caltrans was found by the Superior Court to be violating the Administrative Procedures Act in a case filed by the City of South Pasadena. That put on hold the sale of a number of properties to these so-called nonprofit entities. Earlier, Linda Crossan talked about the sale of 11 properties to this Esperanza housing entity back in 2001. Caltrans bundled all 11 properties together so that the tenants could not bid on any of the properties. This nonprofit entity, which came into existence overnight, founded by former executives in the savings and loan industry, bought the 11 Caltrans properties in 2001 for $600,000, $660,000, roughly 20 cents on the dollar. They have been using those properties to jack up the rents, move people out. Linda Crossan just talked about the 3 families on Revelia, which were just evicted by Esperanza Housing, and Caltrans has taken no action. Caltrans fails to take action when these nonprofit housing entities violate the Roberti bill, violate the covenants under which they bought the properties, and raise the rents exorbitantly and evict tenants. And so that Caltrans' inability to deal with displacement, its inability to deal with environmental impacts, needs to be evaluated in this draft EIR. Otherwise, we don't even know whether Caltrans will follow through on any of the promises it's made. So this draft EIR needs to be linked to the SR 710 North Freeway EIR, and until the 2 projects are linked together and evaluated jointly, both EIRs are in violation of CEQA. Now, I also want to, as a matter of caution, I want to turn in a copy of the full comments I submitted this afternoon to the website that doesn't have the cutoff part that Caltrans has in there. So this is the full comments I submitted this afternoon. If Caltrans truly wanted to minimize the environmental impacts of this program, Caltrans would analyze the sales program that the Caltrans tenants delivered in 2006 to then Caltrans Director Will Kempton. We then delivered it again in 2008 to then Caltrans Director Randy Iwasaki. I was there, so was then Assemblyman Portantino. It was in the Assemblyman's office. We delivered these to the Caltrans Director, the whole head of Caltrans, and both Caltrans Directors said, we're going to submit these to Governor Schwarzenegger and seek a governor's option action request. We had a 2-page outline which would expedite the sales of these properties so it wouldn't take 5 years. We identified the Caltrans person who had done the sales between 1996 and 2002, and she was very competent at getting these sales done and out the door. She was then replaced in 2002, and the sales ground to a halt, and the last sale occurred in 2006 of the first crop. Of those crop of sales, in 1995, the then head of Caltrans, James Van Logensells, who then worked for Governor Wilson, sent a memo to Caltrans in Los Angeles saying, I want to sell 100 of these properties as soon as possible. The Caltrans personnel in Los Angeles, insubordinate as always, sent Van Logensells a list of 52 properties. Eventually, with the help of this one person at Caltrans, over 10 years, they sold about 32 properties, including 11 to this bogus nonprofit, Esperanza. In addition, and they had submitted the list of 52 to the federal court to be approved as part of the 1979 injunction review. But Caltrans then went ahead and sold another 16 properties in the corridor that were never considered as surplus. They just did it out of the blue and without any regulations or anything. So Caltrans has the ability, if they want, to speed up the sales, complete the sales, do them faster. And that the Caltrans staff in Los Angeles has, over the last 20 years, since 1995, dragged their feet when the governor's appointees as the head of Caltrans, starting with James Van Logensells, and then under Governor Davis, under Governor Schwarzenegger, and now under Governor Brown. The Caltrans staff in Los Angeles, quite frankly, believes they are unable to accomplish the sales. They're afraid of making a mistake, and so they don't want to have the sales go forward. And I'm not going to list the Caltrans employees' names who handled the sales very quickly between 1996 and 2002.
Wrap up your comment. I have more people that want to speak.
Fine. Caltrans has the ability and the staff to complete these sales in a very rapid period, maybe 1 or 2 years. And proposing in the DEIR that it takes 5 years is draining people's income while Caltrans raises the rent and displaces people and has further impacts. It is very important that there be an alternative in this DEIR that says that the sales program will be accomplished within 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Don Jones would like to speak again, and then I would just like to do a time check. It is after 8 o'clock. We've reserved this facility from 6 to 8. If you would like to go back and look at the boards, they're still up with people standing by them and ask any questions. So this will be our last comment for the night.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There was a person who did a lot of transportation planning about 40 years ago. His name was Daniel Patrick Moynihan. He coined a phrase called benign neglect. That's where agencies like Caltrans would allow certain consequences to unfold, negatively impacting tenants and communities. And it was seen as benign, almost passive. They didn't really mean to do it. It's just a consequence of the process that 148 families get evicted or lose their homes. But that's not the fact. I'm thankful to Christopher Sutton for reminding me about Linda Wilford and the memo that she put out in 2006 targeting pot stirrers. 11 families who had advocated against the rent increases, who managed to put placards in front of their homes, were targeted by an internal memo. Linda Wilford addressed it to the 710 director, Doug Faley. That has been introduced in evidence in several lawsuits. So we need to understand that of the 11 families that were targeted as pot stirrers, none of them are still there. Manny Morales, his 2 neighbors, Big John, me. I can name others, but I don't want to name them because they haven't said I could. But the fact is that we are targeted in this process. I have no doubt that several of us who are standing up here today would be targeted by those folks sitting at that side over there. They've already indicated their animus towards us by their neglect. It's not benign neglect, it's intentional. You can see that by the consequences. We are real people. We're not concepts. We struggle for the real lives of real people in this community. We are not pass-through, we're not paracaídos, parachutes who come in here and dominate our community and then take the consulting money, jump in their Porsches, and drive out to the west side and have a couple of bimini slings. That's all I have to say.
Well done, Don.
Thank you for your comment. So I want to thank everyone for